Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Saved USC. This is Leslie Wyatt. I'm the Director of Compliance at SoftPro. We are actually on episode 27, believe it or not, and I know we took a little hiatus for the summer. We figured everyone was on vacations like myself, so we're happy to be back. And we just so happened to be returning kind of mid-year, so we thought it was perfect for this episode to talk about mid-year 1099-S form prep. Everyone kind of scrambles at the end of the year, but we can actually show you some stuff and go through some stuff that can kind of keep you on track throughout the year and make it a lot easier towards the end. Just a few housekeeping items before I go ahead and pass it over to our speaker today. Today's episode will be recorded. We will send out a copy of the recording in a recap a couple days from now so that you can share it with your peers if you'd like. We will also include any handouts, which I believe there are some today. If you can click on the handout section here in the WebEx meeting, which should be in your little box. I don't know if it's left or right, depending on where you put it, but it says handouts, and I think there's 5 of them in there. You guys can open them, download them, print them, and then we'll include them in the follow-up as well. Per usual, if you have any questions at all, please click on the question feature box there and go ahead and type them. I will monitor them and I will try and answer what I can and ask away throughout the episode. We encourage questions, that's why we're here. As the email that you received to sign up stated, this is going to be shown through Select. A lot of the features are the same, and our speaker Angel here will mention a few times maybe this is the same in Standard or Enterprise or Classic, so just know that what you're actually visually seeing is Select, but the process is the same in a lot of instances. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, who knows a heck of a lot more how to do this than I do. But we are very fortunate to have Angel Campbell, who's with SoftPro. She works as a business implementation consultant and also a special project manager. So basically, she does it all. She's been with us forever. She's great. And I thank you so much for joining us, Angel. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Leslie. Oh, all right. So it's already almost September. So we are coming up closer and closer to end of the year. And that's scary in and of itself. But what we wanted to do is kind of give you the ability to see what you can do ahead of time to prepare for 1099-S filings. So what we're going to do is just kind of dive in, go over a few areas. And again, if you have any questions, please let us know. All right. So within SoftPro, for all of our versions, we have 2 modules that play with the 1099. We're going to have our Pro 1099 module as well as our Pro Form module. So both our Classic and our Classic Standard Enterprise and our Select will have both of these. With the Pro 1099 module, it's the one place where we can go and integrate in with our Pro Form for one-time data entry. So everything will flow from Pro Form into 1099. We can manage unlimited numbers of 1099-S records. And with as busy as everybody's been during COVID, it's a good thing. We're able to produce exception reports so that we can get a head start on any errors or missing information. I was saying with the 1099, with Pro 1099, it does give you the ability to file your tax submissions through the IRS Fire website. And again, all of that is done within the Pro 1099 module. The other thing that's really important to know is within Pro Form, you have the ability to generate 1099-S forms and give them directly to the sellers at closing. A lot of people are used to doing it at the end of the year and they just do mass mail outs. But if they sign the 1099-S solicitation, you are more than welcome to give them that at the closing. And that way you don't have to worry about mailing them out, which then eliminates the need for the good old-fashioned, for those of you who remember carbon paper, you don't have to do the carbon 1099-S forms. All right, let's see. Okay, so our yearly check-in prior to submission deadline. So what we have here in a perfect world is we would love to have the time to go in at least once a year, if not more, to check in on 3 specific areas. Number 1, we need to verify our company 1099 information is correct. Have there been any changes, possibly in the address that you report with for the IRS, if you have the ability to pull in your information ahead of time with the IRS website. So when I'm saying with your 1099 information, but within Select, it's actually in your 1099 module for those of you who are on Standard and Enterprise. But within Select, in our profile settings, this will look familiar for your Standard and Enterprise people. This is the information on the 1099 screen. So we just want to make sure that our addresses and everything else are correct, that our name control, the TCC code, all of these have been updated for the year because, again, the IRS does look at that information when you do submit to them. Now, also,
Angel?
yeah.
Hey, I'm so sorry. We only see your getting a head start preparing your slideshow. We don't see the program at all. Oh, there you go. Now we do. Perfect.
I don't know what is going on with it, but I am so sorry. I promise this is not usually what it is. Okay, so there you go. So in Select, this is what it looks like, and it lives in SP Admin. But for my Classic and Standard Enterprise people, this would be actually in your Pro 1099 module. So this is exact same, it's just located in two different places. Now, within our all versions, you do have the ability under Pro 1099. So in our other versions, it would be a separate module, but within Select, it's one module. And in here is where you're going to test your login. Very important, because it's not like it's not fun at the last minute trying to get your fire information logged in, and you can't because something's expired. So we tell people generally just go ahead and check it. Make sure everything's up to date on the IRS website, get that done ahead of time, and you won't have that last minute hiccup. The third thing that I like to tell people on a yearly check-in basis is to check to see if SoftPro has offered up any of the any updated forms. So since 2017, they've updated the 1099 once, and right now there is no current newer version, but it's always nice just to make sure within SoftPro that you have the most current version. For my Select people, that's going to be docs. If you just go to the web, it's docs.softprocorp.com. And for my Standard and Enterprise, it's your normal portal that you guys have been going to, the my.softprocorp.com. All right, let's see if we can get this slideshow working back. Let's see. All right. There we go. Perfect. So here's what I was going through. All right. So when should we start to review all of our information? Again, in a perfect world, we have a lot of time, but we know that we are so busy. So do we want to do it monthly? Do we want to do it quarterly, biannually? My favorite, the week before the deadline or the day of the deadline. Ultimately, we would love for any of the three options at the top: monthly, quarterly, biannually. This just gives you the ability to get a head start because there's nothing like procrastination. And at the end of the year, you've got so much that you've got to do. By the time it gets to March, you can't see straight. So we really like to tell people to try to get in as often as possible because it's easy to tack on months or tackle months at a time versus 6 months, 8 months to a year. So what do you want to review in the monthly periods? What we like for people to do is pull in and review your 1099 reports. The biggest report that you're going to want to review is going to be your 1099 exceptions, which we'll go through. But they generally, if we could just get that one knocked out at least 4 times a year, it would make your life so much easier. So we'll go through that report. And then secondary, once you review the reports, go ahead and fix any issues so that, again, at the end of the year, when you're ready to start working up your submission, you don't have 300 plus files to correct. You've been doing them throughout the year. Again, I know that's a perfect world, but that's what we would like to shoot for because it will make your life a whole lot easier. For Pro 1099, for my Classic and Standard Enterprise people, It is the exact same thing that you're going to see on the screen. However, yours is a separate module, whereas in Select, you can see that they have ProForm and Pro 1099 within the same program. You have the ability to do your record searches. When you come in, you have the ability to create a new record. You also have the ability to search. With our new 1099 record button, this is generally if you're creating maybe a 1099-S for an additional trustee, or there was some sort of manual 1099-S that needed to be created due to maybe a decide closing or something that did not run through ProForm. So you will not have to generally come in here and create new files because, again, they do integrate with ProForm. So if that order is in there, it will automatically flow into Pro 1099. With our record search, this gives you the ability, again, your order will live in ProForm, but if for some reason you just need to verify something on a 1099-S record itself, this will give you the ability to search, and I'll get the chance to show you that here in a few minutes. And then our reports, this is the button where you're going to come in and run our actual exception reports and the other reports that we have available for you guys. So one of the questions I get asked a lot of times when we travel to customers is, what exactly makes a 1099 a 1099? So the criteria for that is that the order has to be marked as a purchase. So when you do your file types, you're checking off that it's a purchase, not a refi. And believe it or not, refis are smart enough that they will not create a 1099 record. There has to be at least one seller contact in the file. So within Select only, we have the ability to place in placeholders for our order contacts. And the system is looking for a seller contact. If the seller's not filled in, it at least sees the seller there. So you might create a file and you would have a blank seller name, but at least you have the seller contact. But this does trigger the system to let it know to move this file over to Pro 1099. Also, you have to have a settlement date, which is either equal to or prior to today's date. And last but not least, exclude order from IRS submission checkbox cannot be checked in the order. Now, one of the other criteria that is in Select only is our security profile 1099 tab that I was showing earlier. For those of you who have access to SP admin, you're going to notice that when you go into your profiles and you go to the Pro 1099 or 1099 tab, down here there's an option that says export only escrow closed orders. And this is based off of our escrow status. So on this PowerPoint, I just wanted to give you guys the ability so that you would be able to see a couple of the options and the settings within our system. So let me flip this back over. And right down here, if that box is unchecked, then the system is going to look at the criteria for escrow status of in process or closed. And if it's checked off, it only looks at escrow status, and only those that were marked closed will export to Pro 1099. So that's just a setting. And again, you'll get more information on this with the email that the lovely lady sent out to you after the fact. All right. So a lot of our customers say, well, I didn't know I had to do that in a file. I never heard of that. So I always like to kind of go over your 1099 warnings that you get within your orders. And again, this is Select. With your classic version, you do get the exception report, but in Select, they actually get visual warnings that pop up throughout the life cycle of the file. So whenever these warnings pop up in the order, it's looking for three things, even though it looks like a lot of information. It's specifically looking for a seller tax ID or social security number. It's looking for their forwarding address, not the current address. So you have to fill in that bottom forwarding address, and we'll go over that. But also it's looking for the 1099-S not provided and or signed checkboxes on our 1099 screen. So without having all of this information, this is going to give you incomplete data that's going to flow to your Pro 1099. So this is what makes things show on the exception report when you run them within Pro 1099. When you're in Pro 1099 records, so you're actually in that module, you will also receive warnings from there. We want to make sure that everybody is aware of what needs to happen to make this a good a good 1099S filing and submission. So in this instance, I had a file and I made a change within Proform, not in the order, but within Pro 1099. And when I made the change and tried to save it, it gave me a warning to tell me that the 1099S furnished check boxes have not been selected. So again, that's an error message that was showing within the order. It got skipped, and now it's gotten to this point and it's trying to tell someone, please put in social security number as well as check off if they've been provided and or are exempt with a 1099. Okay. So one of the biggest questions and problems that we see is you may or may not know the true meaning of exclude versus exempt. And in Select, there is a checkbox that is within the express order entry screen as well as the seller proceeds and 1099S screen. This gives you the ability to use the checkbox to exclude the order from IRS submission. Now, what a lot of people think this means is that they are exempt, and that is not at all what this box is. So I just wanted to be clear, just in case someone wasn't sure what exactly exclude order means. So exclude order means any order that you are not responsible for reporting the seller proceeds / 1099S. If the checkbox is checked, this order will not be imported to Pro 1099. So an example of this that I get is title-only files or split closing files. So I, as the agent, escrow company, title company, whomever, am not responsible for the seller proceeds and or reporting 1099S, then I can exclude this file because I don't have anything to do with seller money. Now, if you are and your seller is exempt from a 1099, then this is not the box you want to use. So again, examples of the file would be a title-only file or split closing file. Well, maybe I'm representing the buyer and not doing seller proceeds. The other example or other option is exempt. And so again, this is where people get exclude and exempt a little backwards. So exempt is based on the criteria that the seller fills out in our exception form. And if they mark everything as true, or the seller is a corporation, then they could be exempt from 1099 reporting. And in that instance, for both Classic and for Select, they would check off in the 1099 proceeds screen, they would check off the exempt from 1099 reporting because again, they met the classifications of that either the cell is a true corporation or the exemption form was marked true on all questions by the seller. So just want to make sure you guys can kind of understand the difference between the two because they're a little tricky. And again, it does affect your 1099 reports because the top option of exclude does not push to Pro 1099, so it would not show up when you submit to the IRS. All right, so now let's talk about the nitty-gritty. So with our reports within Proform, we have most of these in both of our softwares. So when I say both, I mean Classic, which is standard and enterprise, and Select. With Select, we have a couple that are newer and they are working to get them in all versions. But what our reports give us is a lot of availability to allow you guys to see what's needed ahead of time. So hence the mid-year check-in. This gives us the ability to kind of run our reports to see what's going on. How do we look? And if we try and catch it, again, it's a whole lot easier in a world to get these done ahead of time so that you don't have 12 months worth of files to correct in, a couple of weeks. We do have additional reports available within Select. We have our supplemental 1099 exception report, which gives us additional options for reporting criteria. We also have a Pro 1099 versus Pro Form data variance and a missing and orphan 1099 record report as well. So we'll give you a brief show of those. And again, just to reiterate, we do suggest that someone please run the 1099-S exception report throughout the year so that it will avoid last-minute stress. All right, so we're going to start looking at some of these reports. So what is the 1099 exception report? What is the difference between default and supplemental in Select? So on the left, you're going to see the default version. So this is our criteria box, and this is the report that our classic people have as well. So this is just the run-of-the-mill, out-of-the-box exceptions report. It gives you the ability to put in your reporting year, as well as if you had multiple TCC numbers or tax ID numbers for your companies. And it does give you the ability to sort either by order number or by name control. But if you look to the right and Select, this is what we call our supplemental, and our supplemental reports always give you additional items. So with this one in the red boxes, you're able to see that you can narrow down your 1099s by profile, or if you want to set it a higher profile and include all sub-profiles, you have the ability to narrow out order type. So if you are a title-only state and you only want to do 1099s on escrow only or title and escrow, you do have those options. You would see a pick list for all of the different escrow officers. And as an ex-escrow officer who did 1099s for 20 plus years, this would have been great to have because I didn't like having to fix everybody else's items. So you could just print them out for that specific person, hand them to them and say, hey, you take care of it. Just kidding. Not really. But anyway, so that's one of the nice things about this report. And then also down here, you could make sure that you check exempt status. You can look at your exempt people, your non-exempt people, just making sure nobody's slipped through. And you can look at statuses as well as product type. So these are the major differences between the two reports. Same report, different result. So I always advise using the supplementals just because there might be something extra that you need on that report. And for classic customers, unfortunately, this one is only available in Select. All right, so before we jump into our lovely name control, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to Select, and we're going to talk through a couple of items within our reports and within our files. So whenever you're in an order, again, the one thing that's really nice about the system is that you're not going to never know about your warnings of the system. So when you search for your file and you're in there, you do get the warnings like we talked about. And when my file will open, I'll show you our errors and warnings down at the bottom. All right, so I'm going to pull this one up. All right, so in this file, I have 2 sellers, and in the next file, I have a bad corporation. Now, these are scenarios that we see all the time in customers' offices, as well as our support team. They get plenty of calls on this. So what I want to do is, first of all, talk about the bad corporation. Now, I have in my order, and again, for my classic people, same instance, because you do have a seller contact. It just looks a little different than it does in Select. So when I go into my seller contact, this file says that I have Flipping Houses Daily LLC. Now, one of the criteria of 1099 submissions is that if it is a true corporation, and there's a reason why I use the word true, then they are automatically exempt. If I have an LLC, then one of 2 things is going to happen. If I did it correctly and I changed my type up here to limited liability company or any of the options below, then this makes the system see that this is not a true corporation. So if I leave it corporation and I go down to my seller proceeds screen, one of the biggest issues that you're going to have is, number one, you're going to automatically exempt an LLC. And LLCs, unless there is a specific criteria with the IRS, which we don't determine, then they will have to file an IRS 1099 submission, or they may be exempt from it as a company. But we still encourage people to go ahead and send 1099s or give them out at closing, because they talk to the IRS and their accountant generally know whether they're going to be exempt or not. So this is a mistake that some people make, and we just want to make sure that you guys are aware of, if we don't look at our corporation type or entity type, then it could make a really bad submission to the IRS. So again, I'm going to go back to my seller contact and open it back up. And if I flip this to what they actually are, and I go back to my 1099S screen, notice how now I have the ability to say if they are exempt or not, but I have no error messages because this is not a true corporation. And I, at this point of time, have to say, yes, I provided them with an exemption form and a 1099S. Yes, they signed it. And at this point, if they are not exempt, then I am good to go. But if they are exempt, then I would check this off. But again, with anybody other than a corporation, you just want to verify that they are exempt using that exemption form that's within SoftPro. All right, so that one's easy peasy. And if I save my file, this file specifically doesn't have any error messages because of user error in the Social Security number forwarding address. But what it would give me errors is when I get to, if I had left that as exempt for corporation, then I would not have a filing. But just so that you guys can see a perfect file, this has the proper type. It is an LLC. It does have a Social Security number or EIN. And then most importantly, your forwarding address versus the current address. All right, so now let's take it a little bit further. I have a file with two sellers. So fun thing here. So I have Penny Pincher and Steve Stingy. Now, if I pull up Penny Pincher, she has in her contact information, she has a Social Security number. We have no forwarding address. And if I go to my 1099S screen, I'm going to notice that I actually took the time to come in here and check those check boxes off. So what I'm going to do is run the exception report so that we can see what on this file shows up on the exception report. But while I'm here, I noticed that Mr. Steve Stingy, he does not have any check boxes, so I don't know if he's exempt or not. So obviously I haven't either read his exemption form or I physically haven't just come in here and checked it off. But when I go to his order contact and open him up, let's see what we have in his contact. So we have a forwarding address, but we don't have a Social Security number. So you can see where little things get missed throughout the file, and we are so busy going from file to file that it's understandable. So how do I know what's wrong with this file without having to run a report? In Select, under errors and warnings, whenever you save a file, it tells you what the order number is, and it tells you what is wrong with your file. So if I'm looking at seller number 2, because I know Steve is second, then it says seller 2 is missing the following. He's missing Social Security number as well as 1099S not provided and or signed. Well, the wonderful thing about Select and any of our programs is once you know what's wrong with the file, you can just simply go in here. So let's say that I got his Social Security number. And when I go into my error and warning, once I tab out of that field, notice that when I save it, it's going to automatically now tell me, okay, that's great, but you still haven't fixed the rest of the issues. So notice his error message now only has that he needs to check those boxes, or we need to check the boxes up on the 1099 screen. Now with Penny, she doesn't have a forwarding address, and forwarding address comes in 4 parts. I'm sorry, street address, city, state, and zip. So if I go back to Penny, and again, I go in and potentially pull in some of her information. So let's just say that she moved to Atlanta. That's all the information she gave me. So I can come in here, put that in, and the moment I save her file, that error and warning now says, okay, great, I have her city, state, and zip, but I still don't know where she lives. So it will continuously keep updating these information parts in your file as you put it in. But if you're the lucky person that gets to do them in Pro 1099, then you're not in the file, so you don't know what's in the file. You're going to go completely off of our exception report. So let's talk about our exception report. Within Pro 1099, and again for Select, it's right here in your Select program. And for Classic Standard Enterprise, you guys will have your Pro 1099 reports within the Pro 1099 module, which is outside of Proform. All right, so when I come into 1099 and I go to my reports, I'm just going to pin these to the side so we can keep looking at them. You're going to notice all of the reports I talked about earlier. One of the ones, the major one, obviously, is our 1099 exceptions, and you guys can see for select users that it is the default folder as well as the supplemental. And those are the two side-by-side comparisons that I did earlier. Now, one of the fun things with reports is whenever you initiate a report, you are going to get your criteria items, so any prompts or information that you want specifically to pull. So if I'm looking at, let's just say I want all of my profiles and I want to include my sub profiles. So this is going to look at everything from the top to the bottom. I give it the reporting year of 2021. And again, I can change that with any other files and reporting years that would be in my database. I'm going to come down here. I could narrow this down if I wanted to give it a little bit smoother of results. And if there's nothing that I want, the system's going to look at all of it and gather it. So it assumes it's everything. So when I hit OK, it's going to render my report. Now, one of the nice things about this report is that, number one, you get some really good information on this report. What I can see is that if I scroll through this report, I notice that I have several different items coming up for different files. So this file didn't have an escrow officer, and this is currently grouped by escrow officer, but this is the file we were just looking at. So when we when we corrected several of the issues that were in those two files, notice that Penny is still missing her forwarding address, but we have everything else. And Steve is very stingy and doesn't want to fill out our exemption form. So we're just waiting to check our boxes off on the 1099-S screen. In worst case scenario, this is going to be the worst option that pops up. So this one is saying that there's no tax ID number, social security, there's no forwarding address, and or there are no check boxes checked off. So basically, it just needs to know what to do. So here's where the big time saver is because I've been at many of customers, and at the end of the year, it may be February of the next year, they're like, you know what, I'm just going to take a gander at the report for the filing year. And it literally is triple digits because they're in the hundreds of pages because nobody clicks the boxes, nor do they put in the information. So this is where your time saver is humongous, because if you can tackle a month at a time or even a quarter at a time, think about how much easier and faster your submission process would be. Again, I understand how everybody's busy, but it really will allow you not to have to stress one person out or many people to get that submission ready. But the report is very, very, very helpful, and it will give you the information needed. The one thing that my report doesn't have is name control issues. So the only other error that you would find is if it doesn't have one of these items in here, then it would say no name control found. And we're going to talk about that in 2 seconds. But again, with this report, just gives you the ability. And one of my select tips and tricks for you guys is if you're the one that's going through all of these files, one of the features that we have in Select that not a lot of customers utilize is if you have a tab up here and you're going to start changing orders, you can actually grab any tile or tab, and if you pull down while holding your mouse button down, you're going to notice that you can put a copy of an order or possibly a report somewhere on your screen. So what's nice about this, instead of having to print this out, I can actually come into this report and scroll up and down on it. And while I go into the file, so like let's go back to our file number for 2 sellers, I can come in here, copy with Control C, and paste it with Control V as in Victor into my quick order search, open up this order, and what it's going to do is allow me to make the change so I can see what's going on. So when I go into my order contacts, I'm going to start with Penny. She finally gave me her information, and she's going to live, let's just say 1 Coca-Cola Highway. Not really a street, but whatever. But that is going to take care of hers. And if I go back and I go to Steve, then he, poor thing, he has everything in here, but what he needed was the 1099 check boxes. So let's go to our seller proceeds and 1099-S screen, and let's say that we provided him one, he signed the solicitation, and on the exemption form, he's true for all, so he is exempt. So at this point, I've completed this one, so I could close this file out and move on to Bedrock Enterprises. So that's what the really nice thing is about the system. Notice that my errors and warnings went away. And if I rerun this report, then guess what happens? He falls off. So Steve and Penny are now no longer on this report. All right. So yay for Penny and Steve. So let's kind of go. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had a couple questions regarding reports, so I just wanted to ask them in case there's something you're going to talk out. So there's 2. The first one is, what about a 1031 exchange wherein the individual seller is listed on the HUD? I don't know if you can think about that and answer that. But and then the second one is, somebody mentioned that they have Select, but they can only see 3 available reports in 1099.
Oh. Awesome. So great question. So probably you have a outdated reports package. So if you go to the docs.softprocorp.com, I believe they have put the report bundles on there for installation for Select. If they're not there, just call support and they will get you the new supplemental report. And I usually tell customers, you know, maybe every 6 months, just check to see. We do release new supplemental reports, I think every 2 months, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just nice to always get the new and greatest of the reports. But again, look at the docs.softprocorp.com. And if not, just contact support and tell them you need a new supplemental report package, and they'll upload the new reports in there. So great question. For your 1031 exchange, I am assuming that you are in Classic, but for both instances, what I'm kind of hearing from the question is that they have the seller as APX 1031, you know, for benefit of penny pincher. So your 1031 exchange, nice fact here, is IRS speaks a different language than the rest of us. So if you have a 1031 exchange for a seller, you're going to utilize the property services received box. This allows the IRS to know that this transaction and this property were in a 1031 exchange. So that will solve that problem. And if they are exempt from filing, then this would solve your problem, especially if you get audited. But if they need the name of the, if we need to switch the name back to just penny pincher versus having the qualified intermediary in there, then we can make that change in Pro 1099, which we will definitely talk about. And then I just see I have a question from, it looks like Emily, maybe possibly, about the split screen. So just one quick little fun thing to watch again is if you have, whenever you're moving around, whether it be a file or an order, order or report, if you click or highlight on a tab and you hold your left mouse key down, when you kind of pull it towards the middle, you're going to get this cross up here. And again, if you want to put it back to where it originated, you put it in the middle, down, left, right. But if I put it back, notice that it puts all my tabs back and I can resort them. But again, to make that happen, take the tab, pull down, holding down your mouse key, and then you can put side by side or top, bottom, whatever it is that you want to do. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. I love doing that with a lot of different reasons, for a lot of different reasons. Awesome. And if that doesn't cover the questions answer, just let us know. I'll be more than happy to go into a little more detail, but I will be jumping in to the secondary part of that 1031 question. All right, so I'm going to switch back to my slideshow, and we're going to talk about, so we were talking about exactly how we are using name control, and that comes up as a warning in some of yours. So the name control shows up on a lot of your reports that you're going to look at for IRS, and not to bore you or put you to sleep, but basically the name control is is established by the IRS whenever someone goes to get a name change on an SS4 form, becomes a citizen or EIN. Anytime that someone is issued one of those, the EIN or the Social Security number, IRS creates this sequence of characters, as they call it, and it is 4 digits long. And there's a lot of if this, then this for IRS, which I'm sure you're not shocked. But how this plays an important role is I've always been told, oh, don't worry about it. And I'm a why person. And truly what's looking at it is if you're filing your 1099 and you're ignoring name control, then what happens is IRS, when they receive the information, they're physically looking and comparing the name control to your IRS record on their system. So, you know, it's kind of a checks and balances for them. So if you give it some random number and then IRS looks at it, they can't match it. So sometimes this can trigger, you know, a rejection or just a, hey, what are you doing kind of email from IRS. So just real briefly, this can all, if you just Google IRS name control, always use IRS document website to get the information from. But this is just kind of relaying that this is important to you. And if you have people, it's pretty easy. It's always the first 4 letters of a last name. So you can see on the right side, Ralph would be Teak, Dorothy Willow would be Will. The only places where it gets a little different is if you have Mrs. hyphenated and you see Brandy Cedar Hawthorne, it would actually be the first last name. So CEDA would be her name control. And then the only awkward other one is if you have Joseph Ash and Linda Birch, they're filing together, but they have different last names. It's always the first person's last name. And with Ash, there is no third letter. So you can actually have only 3 digits and it would just show Ash for him. Businesses, estates, things like that, it's a little bit more hairy, just so that you guys are aware. IRS is crazy sometimes on their rules, but notice that I have the Flamingo and I have the Meadowlark. And the Meadowlark company is Mead. The reason why is you omit the word the when it's followed by more than one word. So because it's got the word company after it's spelled out, then it's me. But notice the flamingo is theft, and it's because there's only word after the V. But anyway, there's some really interesting things on here. So please feel free to Google and search out for IRS name control. It is publication 1220, and it was revised in February of 2021. So that just kind of gives you the ability to understand what in the world they're looking for. So with their 1099 report, so that is one of the big errors that people get, because our system pretty much with the individuals, it will automatically figure. It's when we get very quirky organization types that want to be a little bit difficult. So sometimes a majority, I would say 9 times out of 10, your name control warnings are from organizations, not individuals. So just so that you are aware, you know, it would be helpful for you guys to kind of do your research on that publication 1220, just so that you can see how it should be done if you have to enter in name control. So how do you fix your errors? So if you're reviewing the reports, that's great. That's step one. But how do you do it? So it's a rinse and repeat, as I like to say. You're running the reports. You're going to go into the order and fix it in Proform. Rerun the report just like I did earlier. So I saw that I didn't need Social Security anymore, and I was solving the errors. So in our classic version, you're going to unfortunately not be able to do it the way I just showed, but you would take page 1. That's how I used to do it. Take page 1, run it, fix those orders, rerun the form or the report, and just kind of rinse and repeat and get as far as you can, and then come back the next month and rerun the report, start the process over. So you're just going to do that over and over until you get to the point where that exemption report has nothing on it. So that is a wonderful day in the life of 1099 submissions. Couple other things just so that you guys can see some of the reports. This is kind of an extra added report. It's not one that you need to necessarily do monthly, but it's, again, if you have the time, or quarterly, you know, it's a nice thing to have, because one of the questions we just got was in regards to a 1031 exchange and the name of the seller. This happens a lot with trusts, especially in the Western states, as if you guys are so far away, but in the California area, you know, different states have trustees show different ways on the HUDs and CDs. So it's kind of a fun project at the end to say, okay, how do I fix it in my order to make it work for 1099s? And what this report does is, a majority of times you can fix your order to say exactly what you need to per your state's mandates, but usually that fixes it for 1099. So there wouldn't be any extra changes or revisions inside of Pro 1099. And the reason I say this is because whenever you create your order and it meets the criteria of the purchase file, the settlement date, all of the things I said earlier, then what it does is it automatically sees the criteria, matches them, and then it pushes the order into Pro 1099 and creates the physical submission file to go with the IRS submission to the IRS fire site. Now, if it meets the criteria, great. And if you don't have to make any changes, because you know that if you're in Pro form and you're changing your order, possibly because you forgot to put in the address, the forwarding address, or whatever it is, if you change it in your order in Pro form, then the moment that you change it, it's going to automatically update the Pro 1099 record. So that way you don't have to do it in 2 pieces. However, there are certain organizations and customers out there that they have a third party only have access to Pro 1099, or they have someone maybe in accounting or in the administrative staff that does the 1099s, and they only work out of 1099 and don't go into the Pro form order. So for those of you who have that happen, I highly recommend this report, because this report's a really good one. It's kind of new to us, but it is Pro 1099 versus Pro form data variances. And it's exactly what it says. So for instance, on this one, kind of like your 1031 exchange question that you had, it's a long way to get there, but I'm here. With your seller, notice in this report, it shows exactly how it was in the order. And then over here towards the right, it gives you the ability to say what the Pro 1099 record has and what the Pro form order has. Now, again, if we're submitting to the IRS, this obviously is the important piece of the puzzle. So if I could not get that, if on my HUD and CD and everything else, I had to put the 1031 exchange, or I had to put the name of the trust, not the trustee, in my Pro form order, and in my submission, I need to put only my trustee or only the seller in it, then there's going to be instances where you do go into Pro 1099 and update the record because you want it to be precise to what the IRS is requiring. So this report gives you that ability to say, okay, I see why this is different. And it's because on my file, I had to have it this way for X reason. But for IRS purposes, I needed Seth to be at the front part of it. So you can see in here, someone updated the name in 1099. However, notice they went ahead and put the address for forwarding address for that seller inside the 1099 record. They didn't do it in pro form. So this is one of those areas where, again, if someone outside of the normal pro form is in the system, you're going to probably see that more information gets into the 1099 and not the pro form report. So again, Pro 1099, pro form data variances, it's a really good report just to make sure that everything's jiving, because to me personally, I want all of my social security numbers, all of my forwarding addresses, everything in my order. And truly, unless it's a special circumstance, I really don't want to be changing a whole lot, except for creating manual 1099s if needed, or if I had to update a name just for IRS purposes. That's probably the only time I should see a variance on this report. All right, I don't see anything new. So I'm going to take you guys through another report because the reports are so much fun, right? So with the next report that we have, we are going to go to our, let's go to duplicate report. All right, so our duplicate report is one that we do generally tell customers to use, and the duplicate report is basically just that. It's looking at anything that, I put the wrong screenshot, there it is. It's looking at anything that has the same social security number and or order number. And within select, so classic guys, you don't have to worry about this one, but in this one, you can see that I have Torres Properties, same order number, same social security number. But the reason why these two showed up is this is actually a cool report, because immediately when I saw this, I was like, uh-oh, Houston, we have a problem, because why does one say not furnished and the other one say 1099S furnished? Hence the big information that we talked about organizations earlier. So this one is alarming because this one says exempt and this one says they aren't furnished a 1099S. However, both files are marked exempt. If you guys remember my instance of where I had the LLC, but I had it marked as a corporation, guess what? So this is one of those where one property, 5489, it's saying that that property is completely exempt because they are a quote unquote corporation, whereas this one is not or should not be exempt, and it's because they had the organization as a corporation, not LLC. So kind of a neat find here, but just so that you guys know, duplicate record looks at social security numbers, EINs, and order numbers. And the biggest thing I hope you take away from this is please change your organizations on your sellers. All right, other reports that we have are Pro 1099 reports, missing and orphan 1099 records. It just basically looks at any potential missing 1099 records. So it locates any order that meets those different criterias, the 4 criteria, and they don't see a record in Pro 1099. So possibly someone deleted it or something happened. So that is our missing and orphan 1099 records report. And then our 1099S record listing. If you have insomnia and you just want to read all of your 1099S records for certain years or certain areas, then you can go to sleep knowing that it will put you to sleep. But this one will give you all of the records depending on the report prompts and option dialogues that you pick. Maybe you do this year, last year, whatever it is, but it's just going to give you a list of your different areas. All right, so couple of the resources that I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of. I took several, 5 to be exact, of the handouts. And they are actually, if you hit F1 in our system, again, reminding you that F1 takes you to the specific field and tells you what it needs. But if you just hit the home button just to get to this screen right here, you're going to notice that we have Proform video, videos for Pro 1099 as well as job aids for 1099s. And the 5 job aids that I did attach are in here, and there's a couple of extra, but there are several reports. One of the things we're not covering today is the IRS fire submission, because you're probably not going to have to do that, obviously, until next year come filing time. So there will be more resources and videos out there and classes as well. But in case you're bored and want to go watch it, you can click on videos Pro 1099, and it is called IRS Fire Submission. But job aids for anything within our system and videos are in here, and at any point in time, F1 will get you here. We also usually keep a Pro 1099 frequently asked questions, so sometimes you'll maybe find the answer that you're looking for on the screen. Let's see, I think I have.
Hey, Lauren, there's another question.
Yes. All right.
Hey, Lauren, there's one more question here. It says, how do you know if the property is owned by a trust, if the 1099 should show the trustee's name or the trust name when we file the 1099?
So that would be something that you definitely, that's kind of a tax advice question. I know that in a majority of the customers that we service and in personal filing days, that the system would ask for the name of the trustee, or the IRS preferred the name of the trustee. So I don't look good in horizontal stripes. I don't give a tax advice, but I would check with the publications just to see what is preferred by IRS. But I know that a lot of the IRS records that go out generally have the trustee, because they have they don't have a EIN or a tax ID number for the trust, but the trustees would be taxed on it. So in my non-tax advice here, I would say if the if the trust has a tax ID number, it would show the trust. If the trust does not have a tax ID number, it generally is going to be reported by one of the trustees, and it would be their name. You like that disclaimer there, Leslie?
I'm all about disclaimers. We know this.
I knew that would make you happy. All right, and I'm just checking through my slides just to make sure we got everything covered. All right, only other thing resource-wise, I kind of said something about it earlier. For my select customers online, this is docs.softprocorp.com. It's our new documents portal. Please check it out. For my classic peeps, this has been around for you guys for a really long time. It's my.softpro.com. But this is where you can go and get updated tax forms for the year. You can get updated reports, underwriter bundles, fun stuff like that. So if you guys have not signed up for my.softpro.com, softprocorp.com, or docs.softprocorp.com, please do. It's a great resource. And like I said, F1, I cannot tell you guys enough about F1. It is amazing. So just take some time and feel free to look at the Pro 1099 videos as well as the Pro 1099 reports. All right, Miss Leslie, my part is done unless hopefully we have some more questions.
No, and perfect timing. This is great. You were able to answer the questions as we went through, so I really appreciate it. And with that, I think we are going to end our webinar. And just as a reminder, we will send a follow-up email with all sorts of information, including a recording of this webinar and some of the attachments. If you weren't able to grab them throughout, that's fine. And like Angel said, F1 has endless resources. For those of you that didn't have the reports that you were looking at, just as a reminder, you can go to our docs portal through our website, or you can call support. They're happy to assist as well. And if you happen to think of a question after the fact, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer, or in this case, have Angel answer for you. So again, Angel, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all this great information. And thank you to everybody else who joined us. And be on the lookout for our next webinar information that we'll send out in a week or so. So thanks so much, and everybody have a great Tuesday.
Thank you, guys.